Dick Fosbury was the man that changed high jump forever. And he did this by creating his very own technique, the Fosbury flop. Richard Dick Fosbury was born in Portland, Oregon on March 6, 1947, where he attended Medford High School. High jump in the 1950s used the straddle technique, a technique that had been around since the origin of the sport in the 1800s. This technique got its name because the way athletes swung their leg over the bar looked like they were straddling a horse. One of the reasons that this method was used for so long is because it allowed athletes to catch themselves or land on their feet, which was important because high jump in the 1950s and earlier did not have soft foam pads to land on. They landed on sawdust, wood chips, and dirt, as opposed to today's large foam pads. Fosbury, however, lacked the coordination required to execute the straddle method properly and decided to experiment with a different method, the scissor method. This technique was much simpler and didn't require athletes to have to change their body orientation whilst lifting their limbs. Athletes simply jump off their outside leg, lift their lead leg, and then lift their trailing leg to follow. Fosbury used the basics of the scissor jump as the foundation for his technique, the flop. It can be seen that the approach is somewhat similar, as they both involve lifting the lead leg while jumping off the outside foot. Where Fosbury was different was his flight. Instead of just lifting his leg, he began to start leaning backwards as he found this to keep his center of mass lower, which means you don't have to jump as high to get your whole body over the bar. Fosbury's performance in high school was fantastic. His coaches, however, were not supportive of his different style. They didn't allow him to use it in his early meets and forced him to continue to practice the classic straddle method. During his junior year, however, Fosbury ignored his coaches and used his method at track meet, shattering his high school record with a jump of 6'3". And this, his coaches couldn't ignore. From now on, the only method Dick used was his own, and later during his senior year, he took second place in the state with an impressive jump of 6 foot 5.5 inches, shattering his own record. News and media outlets began to show up at his meets, taking pictures and jotting down notes. The first publicity he received was in 1964, when the Medford Mail Tribune ran a photo of him jumping captioned, "Fosbury flops over the bar." Another newspaper article wrote that Fosbury looks like a fish flopping around in a boat, and the technique hurt to watch. Fosbury ignored the criticism and hate and trusted his technique, knowing all too well that the proof was in the numbers and he was onto something big. In a later interview, Dick tells us that these things didn't actually hurt him, but encouraged him to do better.
And that's where the media sort of first cottoned on to it. They dubbed you the laziest high jumper, and what was a lot of other things that I've read about it. I mean, the fish flopping into a boat. You know, I mean, what was the ridicule
that
like?
Encouraged me, even in the context of people laughing at what I was doing.
Fosbury graduated from Medford High in 1965 and enrolled at Oregon State University under the school's coach, Bernie Wagner. Fosbury faced adversity all over again, as his new coach believed that he had greater long-term potential using the Western roll technique, which was similar to the straddle. Fosbury was only allowed to use his preferred technique in freshman meets, which didn't have much significance in terms of his career. During his sophomore year, he ended the debate between he and Bernie when he jumped 6 foot 10 inches at his first meet that year, using his preferred back-first flop. This height shattered the school's record, and after the meet, Bernie had a chat with Fosbury and told him that he's seen enough, and that Fosbury's technique had proven itself to be the future of high jump. During his later years at Oregon State, Fosbury went on to win the Pac-8 conference title, with his highest jump being 7 feet 2.5 inches. Shortly after this win, and his graduation in June, Fosbury proceeded to win the U.S. Olympic trials in Los Angeles with a jump height of 7 foot 1 inch. The U.S. Olympic Committee's stubborn nature prevented them from accepting what they saw, which was that the flop was simply a better technique. They said that they were worried Fosbury wouldn't be able to perform his technique at the high altitude of the upcoming Mexico City Olympics. However, another Olympic jumping trial was held at a higher altitude, where only 3 of the 4 candidates cleared the top height of 7 foot 2, and Fosbury was one of them. So the 3-man Olympic team was set. At the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, Dick Fosbury went on to win the gold medal, with an Olympic record-breaking jump of 7 feet 4 1/4 inch. This marked the end of the straddle era and the beginning of the reign of the Fosbury flop. From this point forward, it was practically the only jump technique used by all Olympic jumpers alike. For revolutionizing the sport, Fosbury was inducted into the National Track and Field Hall of Fame in 1981. Unfortunately, Fosbury was diagnosed with stage 1 lymphoma in 2008 and had a successful surgery that removed the tumor. But later, on March 12, 2023, Dick Fosbury passed away at age 76 due to a sudden recurrence of the lymphoma. And though he isn't alive to commentate on and coach today's high jumpers, he will always be the forefather of high jump and a name for the history books.